The 2026 NFL Draft is being talked about as a very deep tight end class, but to be honest, I just don't see it with this group. I have just one tight end in my top 50, which I'm sure all of you can guess who that is, and I only have two tight ends in my top 100, with the second player being my number 100 prospect. I just don't see there being enough depth in this class, and I see a lot of number 2s and number 3s. One player who there seems to be a lot of buzz on that unfortunately I don't get the hype with is Vanderbilt tight end Eli Stowers. Stowers is a really impressive athlete that is coming off back-to-back really productive seasons for the Commodores, and today we are going to be talking about what I like and don't like about him as an NFL player. But hey guys, if you guys are new to the channel, consider hitting that like and subscribe button. It helps me out a ton, and it helps get this video out to more NFL draft fans like yourselves. Comment down below which prospects you guys would like to see me talk about in a future video, and without further ado, let's get into it. Eli Stowers has had a very interesting college journey because he was a quarterback coming out of high school, and he committed to Texas A&M as a 4-star quarterback. Things didn't work out for him, so after a couple of years, he made the transition to tight end, where he played 1 year with the Aggies and then transferred to New Mexico State, where he had 361 yards, and from there, he followed Clark Lee to Vanderbilt, where over the last 2 seasons, Stowers has really broken out and been one of the better tight ends in college football. In 2024, Stowers had 50 receptions for 644 yards and 5 touchdowns, and he decided to return to college for one last season and helped Vanderbilt to their most successful season in years, finishing with 62 receptions for 769 yards and 4 touchdowns. He's a player who's been generating a lot of draft hype over the last year or so, and I think a lot of people are really intrigued by the body of work in such a short sample size. He's only been a tight end for 4 seasons, but he's turned those into 4 pretty productive seasons and has gotten better pretty much each and every year. I think the number one talking point about Eli Stowers and why so many people are going to be high on him in this class is because I think he is a good athlete. Stowers is very explosive and has a really good first step off the line of scrimmage. But I also think the long speed is really solid. I think he is a guy that can stretch the seam vertically and is a pretty good player. I also think he's one of the best tight ends in this draft after the catch, because with the football in his hands, I think Stowers is a playmaker. He is really elusive. I think he's got quick feet, and he's just a hard player to bring down and tackle. I think it's really easy to buy into the athletic profile and easy to see why teams are going to be pretty high on him in the NFL draft. I also think Eli Stowers is a good receiving tight end. He's got really strong hands, doesn't drop the ball very often, and he does a very nice job of contorting his body in the air and locating the football. He has done most of his damage as a big slot at Vanderbilt, where I think that's where you're going to get the most out of him. He's going to be a very nice piece to your receiving attack and is a player that has good hands and a player that I think you can utilize in motion and find ways to get him the football in unique opportunities, because getting him with the ball in his hands I think is where you're going to maximize his abilities as an NFL player. Unfortunately though, outside of the athleticism, I have a really hard time buying into Eli Stowers as one of the top tight ends in this class. For one thing, I don't think he's a good enough route runner. There are times when you see him set up an okay double move, because I do think his feet are pretty quick, but Stowers really struggles to get open down the field against man coverage, and the biggest reason is because he's slow when breaking out of his routes. He doesn't sink his hips well enough, and his change of direction is really lacking. And because of this, if you're watching a lot of his touches at Vanderbilt, they were giving him a lot of easy opportunities. I think a lot of people have this notion that Eli Stowers is going to be a big play tight end and a guy who can challenge all 3 levels of the field, but I just think the tape tells a different story. A lot of his targets come on screens, quick sideline outs, or passes at around 8 to 10 yards of the line of scrimmage where he's beating zone coverage. But in terms of separating against man coverage, I just don't see that ability in Eli Stowers' game, and he had just 16 receptions go for more than 10 yards in 2025. I think the lack of route running and the struggles he has to separate are a really big concern for a guy that is likely going to be viewed as a primarily receiving tight end in the league, because I don't think Eli Stowers has the body or the frame to be an inline tight end at the next level. Vanderbilt almost exclusively played Stowers in the slot, where he was that big receiving type of tight end, and when he was asked to block, it wasn't the prettiest. Stowers is listed at 235 pounds, which is very small for a tight end, and I just don't see him being a very physical player. Even the contested catch numbers are lower than you would like to see for a primarily receiving tight end, at less than 50%. Stowers has to get stronger and continue to add on muscle at the next level if he's going to develop as a blocker. I think his technique needs a lot of work, because there were times where defensive backs were able to easily push him around, and I think he's got a ways to go before we view him as a number one tight end at the NFL level, if that development ever happens at all. Eli Stowers is a player getting borderline top 50 draft type in this class, and I don't see that in any way, shape, or form. He's a good athlete, but he's undersized, he's not a very good route runner, and he's not a good blocker. And I struggle to figure out how he fits at the next level, because so many people are going to talk about the success of Harold Fannin and Aronde Gadsden in their rookie seasons, and they think Eli Stowers is just going to fit the mold. But for every one of those two players, which those guys are rare in the league, there are guys like Jared Wiley who flame out of the league really quickly, and there are guys that just don't have an impact. And unfortunately, I think all of those guys from last year in Gadsden and Fannin were much better route runners than Stowers. I struggle to understand the hype, and ultimately Stowers is my tight end 6 and is outside of my top 100. In terms of a scheme fit, Eli Stowers is a big slot type of tight end. He's too small and too much of a liability on the line of scrimmage as an inline blocker, but as a guy that can be that glorified slot weapon for you, I think there are ways where you can get mismatches, you can use him as a vertical threat, and I think that's ultimately going to be his role at the next level, and he's probably going to settle in as a good number 2 tight end on an NFL roster. My player comparison for Eli Stowers is a bit of a twofold. I think there is a high-end comparison and a low-end, with the best case scenario being Buffalo Bills tight end Dalton Kincaid, who is an undersized player, is a very nice receiving tight end, but is a liability in the ground game and is a very bad blocker. He was a nice athlete coming out of Utah. I think he had a little bit more as a route runner, and I really liked Kincaid, but it's safe to say he's been a disappointment as a former first-round pick in Buffalo. The other, and unfortunately more likely scenario to me, is Indianapolis Colts tight end Will Mallory, who is a very similar build as an undersized big slot type of tight end who is a good athlete. He's a nice vertical threat, but doesn't offer much other than speed at the position, and has gotten buried on the depth chart and is the number 4 tight end on the Colts roster. I think Stowers has a range of outcomes between those two types of players, but either way, I just don't see him being impactful enough to justify taking in the top 100. Eli Stowers is an intriguing tight end. Yes, he's a good athlete, but I think he's got a long ways to go before he ever reaches a point where I'm okay with him being my tight end 1 on an NFL roster. And ultimately, I believe that Eli Stowers will be selected in the top 100 of the 2026 NFL Draft.